Today I am live with Ashley, Director of Marketing at Simple Focus, and we're going to go into business strategy, content strategy, and also we're going to take it a little bit different route as well. We're going to go into some email newsletter types of strategy too, because she focuses on that as well. So she'll give us a quick intro about who she is, what she does, and then we'll dive right into the content.
Thank you for having me. I like how you avoided having to pronounce my last name because I
Yeah,
hadn't coached you on it.
no, I can barely pronounce my own last name, so I don't even try to
Mine
pronounce
is
other
my
people's.
husband's, right? I
Oh
have
yeah.
inherited this mouthful. It is Guttuso. And it
Mm.
helps if you lose part of your family at the train station in Naples and you have to talk to the people there to make an announcement over the intercom, because then you realize it should be pronounced Guttuso. The
Oh.
Guttuso. Yeah. So that's
That's
my
great.
strongest impression of how you should say my name. But we are from the deep South, and growing up in Mississippi, his name Sal has 2 syllables. It's Sal
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Guttuso. Yeah. So I'm Ashley Guttuso. I'm at Simple Focus Software, and I direct marketing for actually 8 brands here. They're all micro SaaS brands and have a background in journalism. So got my master's in journalism right about the time that blogs were new and Facebook had not even been launched yet. And kind of transitioned from a magazine journalist to a marketer along with the industry, because that's where the strong editors and writers, that's what we ended up being pulled into almost as the industry landscape changed. So I've always been a person who looks for the story in something and figures out how to tell it in a captivating way to get the attention of the sought after target persona. But that did transition. And so I kind of went from magazines to copywriting for circuitcity.com. And then eventually to helping my husband launch a business around his passion, which is taking people metal detecting. So we used a lot of video content marketing with that and Facebook groups when Facebook groups were new. And then that led me into my current path, which is in SaaS marketing. So really taking all of those, are the people who should care about what I want them to care about, where are they hanging out and how to best get their attention with content that attracts instead of baits. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that sounds great. You definitely have a lot more strengths when it comes to writing than I do. I'm more of a, let's say, video person. That's the reason why I do lots of video content. When it comes to writing, that is definitely not my strength. I'll
you
just
know
say that.
I went to college with my CEO, and we're having a conversation about this the other day,
Hmm.
because he wanted to share an article with me and tell me about what this business impact would be. Let's just spitball about this. And I was like, well, let's get on a Zoom call. And he was like, I've been told before that when I talk, I say it 3 times because I'm a writer and I edit myself, and it gets better each time I said it. But the person listening had to just listen to me say it 3 times to figure it out. So I think you're right. I think there are personalities. I find myself to be a much stronger writer. I will glance at this video in retrospect, and I will laugh at my own jokes because I think I'm hilarious. And then I think I'm stupid for thinking I'm hilarious. But it will pain me to go, oh, I could have written that so much more compellingly. But I think you have to kind of just force yourself into it, and that conversations are at the heart of good content. So I embrace starting with video, starting with recording something, and then taking those conversations and scaling that and letting it drive your written content.
Yeah.
Because you've had a good, healthy conversation about it. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what I end up doing with the content, like for example, after this webinar, I'll get my team to cut it into pieces and then cut it into clips, and then I'll transcribe that audio, put it into a blog, and then I'll have like a copywriter to kind of like dissect it and like take out
mhm.
the take the valuable pieces and kind of start with that. because there's no way I could do that because I'm just like simply not a writer. And I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, and copywriting is definitely one of my weaknesses. And it's definitely something that I need to have a team for because it's just not pretty. Let's just
Well,
say
it's
that.
great that you can evaluate that and you know which parts of the recipe that you want to own, and that you then hire people with strengths to hire to handle the other parts. Right? It's like being a chef in a kitchen that needs a sous chef or a few other people who are in charge of just desserts or different pieces of a meal. So I
And
applaud that.
and I think it's important to be doing something that like when it comes to your strengths. And if you enjoy it, yes, you have to go outside of your comfort zone just a little bit, but at the same time, you should be doing whatever process or specialize in whatever you like the most and go all out on that specific topic
Mhm.
and kind of do whatever you like to enjoy doing and just kind of either hire or whatever you want to do the rest of the part that you don't necessarily enjoy. Like, for example, on LinkedIn, I focus 110% of all my attention on driving LinkedIn because it's such a great opportunity right now with the amazing organic reach on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
But I don't necessarily focus on YouTube and Facebook and everything else because I just don't like those platforms necessarily. And I don't want to focus all my attention on them. And that's why I have a team to focus on those other platforms for me. But I focus 100% my attention on LinkedIn at all times.
Nice. Yeah. So it's good to be able to prioritize as a marketer and figure out what's going to work for you, what's not, and then what is going to work for you that you can be passionate about. Because if you don't, I tell newsletter creators this all the time. Like, if you're doing it because you think you should be doing it, but you're not passionate about it and you're not excited about it, it's going to fizzle.
Mhm.
Like, even if you come in with a bunch of momentum, if it's not a thing that you can do week after week or day after day or whatever cadence you have established for yourself, it's going to derail at some point, and you're going to let yourself miss a deadline. Or so you have to be excited enough about what you're creating, or the results what you're creating is create. Like, sometimes people have to just feed off of that. Like, they have to go in with an MVP into a channel that they're not super excited about, but see it have results to then want to pour more energy into it. But you have to find something that you can be excited about and that you can have an opinion about, because if you don't, you just get lost in the mix of everyone who's spouting the same like 5 tips for whatever kind of content.
And yeah, you're so right. And like as you probably noticed, every business sucks at content. Like very, very, very few, like only usually the top 1% of businesses are actually really good at creating very broad amount of content and niche specific content
Mhm.
without just like for example, most brands on Instagram just show their product in different directions and like different
Mhm.
lifestyle photos of their product. But that's not adding value to the end consumer of like for example if you sell an energy drink and you would get a lot more value after seeing like best ways to wake up, best ways to get through your day, how to stay stress free throughout
Mhm.
your workday. Like all that content would be very valuable and niche specific toward the audience you're targeting, and you'd provide value to the customer, and in return you would get a lot more engagement on that content. But instead, a lot more brands prefer to take the easy route and just show their product in different ways. So, what would you say to different brand owners and business owners, or just businesses in general, to start producing more content? Because, as you know,
Mhm.
it's extremely important for these businesses to produce content. So, what would you tell them to get them to start the process of producing content?
So I think the easiest way to start producing content is through conversations with your target personas, because you need to figure out what they care about, because producing content around things they don't care about is not aligning with your brand, and it's not going to result in the success you want. So the thought here is this, is that anything, any approach, once everyone starts using it as a best practice, becomes a worse practice, or it becomes just like we're like everyone else. So I would encourage brands to figure out, not just like have the conversations and use content as an MVP. Content is like social content is great to test. Does this messaging work? Did we get more likes? And I'm not talking like time of day. I'm talking like, did more people engage with this story than that story? And so you can start to figure out what stories are resonating best and getting the most activity, but you can't tell that story that same way over and over again. So you have to look at the competitive landscape and figure out not just like what will stand out, but what you can get behind and have an opinion about, and post with enthusiasm for like what you're testing or your new messaging. So I would say that by the time everyone is doing something a certain way, that your job is, like, as marketers, our job is to figure out how to not look like everyone else. If I could go to 5 social accounts that sell similar things that you sell and not really go like if it was like a like, what do they call it, like the prison lineup or whatever, and
Oh
I
yeah,
could,
yeah.
right, if I couldn't call out and say like, this is this one's brand, right, because I'm looking at the stream and I know, then you haven't done your job. You've done your job of looking like your category, not a brand.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point. And I always tell people to show what makes your product unique, what makes your product different from everyone else, and really establish, like yesterday, we had the conversation on another webinar, the difference between quality and relatability. Like, there are a lot of, like, for example, on Amazon, there are a lot of people having these professional videos done, but sometimes they're not performing as well because
Mm-hmm.
it's not aligning to what the customer wants. It looks like everyone has a professional video, and it makes it where it just becomes a commercial and nobody looks at it anymore. It becomes normal to the customer
Mm-hmm.
mindset. But it's when you produce that maybe lower quality image, that lower quality video, but at the end, you create more relatability to your end consumer. And that makes it
Mm-hmm.
where you have that better engagement, where people are actually starting to relate to your brand and really see what makes you unique after that. So, quality and creating these professional videos won't necessarily make it where you have an increase of engagement or sales or anything else. Sometimes it just takes just becoming relatable with them. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if you took a team picture, like a picture of your team, between you guys being serious, a professional picture, and the difference between you taking a picture on your iPhone of funny faces, most likely the funny face picture will do better because you are being more relatable to your customer, to your end consumer, and they're going to say, wow, they really seem like good people after that. But most people only go for the professional route, and taking that funny picture with your funny faces, that's what's going to make you stand out versus everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone else wants to be like act professional and do all these things, but that's not being human. Like, when you're
Mm-hmm.
being professional, you're putting a filter on your human self. That is what being professional is. And we all have those personal selves inside of us, being human, but we filter that through professionalism. So it's so important just to be personable, and that way you can create that ending relationship with someone else.
I agree a lot. I think one term that has been used for this is like content engineering. And there's like a brand out there called Coley who is helping people, like, their software is supporting in some way, helping you ABC test, like, hey, what about if we just did this raw image instead of this photoshopped to the extreme image. So I think production quality, especially with videos, it's actually best to test with things that, like, I don't have an expensive recording device right now, and I'm doing just fine. I think it's better if you're not flooding money into something that you haven't tested and gone like, oh, we should up the quality of this now because we've seen how it works. But to what you're talking about, a good example of relatable, like raw footage versus super polished we obviously hired a team to come in and design this campaign, would be Big Chill. And they make They make like really expensive refrigerators that look like vintage, right? And they had a new line come out recently that I'm like eyeing, but not going to end up converting on, but like still like it's inspirational, right? And so if you go to the feature page for that particular refrigerator, you're going to start getting hit with pixel ads, and they are not slick, fancy ads. They are warehouse videos of their CEO going, oh, it's here. And like, he's just like opening the fridge, and the caption is like CEO or founder or whatever, checking out the new classic line. Right. And he's just opening. And so as a potential buyer, you're like, oh, there's a real person looking at this real fridge, and it's not in this slick, like Better Homes and Gardens vignette kind of shot where the perfect wife is opening the perfect fridge or what, you know what I'm saying? Like it's in the warehouse. It's in the warehouse, and it's good because it's different, right? So that's where sometimes raw is different. Sometimes super polished is different. So I think it's very nuanced, and you have to figure out what is going to work right now and not rely on that to work in the future. So almost be on the lookout for new trends you can set, new games and plays you can create with your content.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's something that is really important because a lot of people look for that perfect content, that they're always trying to chase that
doesn't
perfect
exist.
piece of content, which takes forever to create. And like, you never know, like you could spend like a month creating this professional video, but at the end of the day, like you literally could take a video on iPhone in one day and see how that performs. So it's so important not to try to make every single piece of content perfect, and just try and test all these other things. And you brought up another good point by actually talking with your customers.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. And I think that's a really great conversation, because what you think the customer may want can be completely different from what the customer actually wants. And that's super important, because like a lot of like business owners and everything else say like, oh, they won't like that type of content just because that's how they see it. But the consumer might like completely something else. And that's why I always recommend testing a lot of different things. And because you never know which creative might do the best within your content strategy.
Yes. And so one conversation I've had recently, because under our portfolio, our umbrella, we have a newsletter software called Curated, right? And that just supports you grabbing links from anywhere on the internet, saving them with a Chrome extension, and then having them ready to import into a newsletter. And I had a discussion, I don't know, a few weeks ago with someone about like the fear of launching a newsletter had to do with the fear of creating all the content and not knowing what the customer really would find exciting. So in the context of a newsletter, curating links from other sources, like that team spent the week on the blog about the 3 tips that will help your customer. Like that, whether they're a competitor or an adjacent industry or something. So that actually can be used as an MVP for testing content. All you've got to do is put it in context. The team at so-and-so wrote this. I think it would be helpful to you, my buyer, customer persona, like whoever you're sending this newsletter to, right? And then watch what categories get clicked, watch what links get clicked. That will help you understand, oh, we could do well to go in that direction, or nobody clicked it. Thank God we didn't spend a week of our time creating that content.
Yeah.
Right? So I say a lot of social posts and even with newsletters, if you're thinking about testing an idea, go find someone else who has already said something interesting and see what resonates with your audience. Doing that and reading it in a way where you're trying to provide someone else context around it then helps you start to form an opinion. Like, is what they said right, or do I believe like 90% of this? And I'm going to tell my reader, like, take this with a grain of salt. So you can build in brand personality without building massive heaps of content.
Yeah. And I find that interesting because it seems like the traffic you're driving through your newsletter might help the blogger. Yeah, I guess it would help both really. So that's a great segue into how do you typically get traffic for your newsletter to begin with? Because normally you can, like, let's say you build up a newsletter, you push all the push most of the traffic to your website, for example, and then as Google sees, like, okay, they have good quality score, there's a lot of people going to this website, I'm going to start ranking it higher, and then that way you can get more signups. How do you typically get more people into your newsletter and increase the traffic there?
I think it's dangerous to talk about this in broad terms because there are several different types of newsletters out there that I talk to creators who kind of fall into three personas. They fall into marketers. So marketers can sometimes be using newsletter for acquisition, but they also are sometimes working with the customer success team on a customer-facing newsletter. Or they're doing one newsletter that kind of serves both purposes, right? And it's going out to both leads and prospects. Then I have editorial newsletter creators who are like big publishers and small independent creators. So those kind of have different reasons for existing, right? But the most successful newsletters, even marketing newsletters, are written editorially instead of promo, unless you are B2C, like direct to consumer. And then you're probably sending out a newsletter that has a mix of products that are new or special at that exact moment. I heard from a friend the other day who said she's getting a newsletter from a florist in her town that gives like creative ideas in addition to the flower of the day or something like that. So like she's still subscribed to this newsletter and they get her business when she is in need of flowers, but they're making deposits daily because they're giving her ideas, right? So I'm trying to circle back to the question to make sure I don't miss it. But getting people to your newsletter is going to have to happen in multiple ways. A lot of people forget to put a link in their top navigation of their website or a pop-up, which I kind of go back and forth on pop-ups. But if you are automatically subscribing people to your newsletter because of their purchase of X or their engagement with this content and this download of this ebook, like you need to be careful because what you want with a newsletter, what you want with any content is that the moment it has been read and finished, for them to think, I want more of that, right? So an opt-in should be, give me more. It's not here's something we could give you, like a gated ebook, if you'll give us our email address so we can annoy the mess out of you after this, right? Right? Yeah. It should be, here's this great thing we wrote. Do you want more? Yes, fill in this form. Because then the relationship is they have said, I want more of this, not I will exchange this for that and then deal with your emails until I need to unsubscribe. And so the way that that my newsletter is set up and that Curated is set up is that the archives are automatically published as a web page and a searchable archives of the site. So you could go to my newsletter and never subscribe to it. It could be just like a blog to you that you go and check every once in a while, right? And you could go through all of the archives and search it and find all the information you wanted and just like be like, I'll go back and check it every week or so. right? Or you could say, no, this is so good. I want to receive it. I am asking you to be a part of my weekly email adventure, right? So I think a lot of times marketers think of content as a thing to lure and bait and trap. And when you switch that intention to like, no, I want to give such good stuff that people are looking for the way that they can get more.
Yeah, that's a great
Mm-hmm.
point. That really is. And I think it falls into the the category between marketing and sales. When you're marketing, you're building brands and you're building up a trust between you and the customer and or consumer, client, whatever it may be. And you can't do that if you're selling to them every single time. Like for example, that florist, for example. So if she did, for example, flowers, like that flower of the day, people are going to be naturally inclined to want to look at her emails and actually be interested in them. In
Mm-hmm.
return, most likely, now that they know and see that, she could at the bottom say, "Oh, we have these flowers in stock, by the way." And then they'd be, "Oh, I love this flower. It means this and this and this. I want to go buy it." And that makes sense. But if she would have put, "Oh, these flowers 20% off now," yeah, she might get a little sale starting out, but at the very end, that's very short term. That's not very long term growth that she's going to be gaining out of that. So
Right.
it makes it where it's all about the long term growth of it. And you can't do that if you're selling, 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 selling.
Right. And any content, whether it's your newsletter or your video series or your podcast, whatever you're putting out, it should be done to deepen a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to imagine that the person who encounters this content, whether it was on social, on LinkedIn, or a friend recommended it, or they somehow ended up on your website because they searched a term that you rank high for, and they have now opted into your newsletter or your content, or they're connected with you on LinkedIn and have chosen to follow, right? That what you want to do is create almost like a Netflix series for them. They need to want to binge you. And the way to do that is to earn the right to be promotional, or to do content so well that you don't even need to be promotional because they're like, this is so good. What else does this person offer? Like, why does this person know so much about this? So I think there's a balance that I tell people to follow in newsletters specifically, especially like SaaS brand editorial style newsletter, that would be 10, maybe 20% promotion. Like you are your own sponsor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in there, you're mentioning your product. The rest needs to be full on like buffet of things that can help that person so that they come back over and over and over, and you've built and deepened a relationship. But if you bait someone in and then you start promo, oh, and a little helpful information, then like who would date that person? Who would date that person, right? Like think of your brand as someone you want people to date and to get married to, and it's not going to work if it's like, I'd like to take you out so I can pitch you.
Yeah, that's so great. That's a great analogy right there.
It's a very Donald Miller story brand. I can't take credit for the dating. He brings that into his methodology.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, that's a great point. And you have to also think word of mouth. Like, think about it. If you create a super valuable piece of content that a lot of people find valuable, what that person is going to do is they're going to look at it and then they're going to share it with all their colleagues that also might find it valuable. And they're going to say, "Oh, this was super valuable. Here you go." And they're going to share it. And those people are going to share it. And now those 500 people that read your newsletter are now 1,000 because they shared it, and they're most likely going to subscribe if they keep finding it valuable. And
So
you're building trust with that customer. But if you sold to that customer, you would have reached like like out of that email, you probably almost none of them would have ended up opening it because they wouldn't have necessarily liked to be sold to. We're so used to it as consumers now to be sold to that it's not even it's we don't like it. No one likes to be sold to,
Mhm.
like you're saying, and no one's going to also share that. So if you share that valuable piece of content, that's when more people will spread that word of
Mhm.
mouth of what you are doing and most likely get more sales than if you actually sold to them. So it's so important to provide as much value as you can, build up that trust, and then you will naturally get shares and you'll be able to increase your awareness a lot faster than if you were just sold to them 24/7.
Yes, and I will add a caveat that there was a
Mhm.
great article. Obviously, I curated it and put it in my newsletter on influential people. Like we could call it influencers, but it was a different term in this article. But it was on Spark Toro, and it was about the idea that when you are creating content, you need to think not only about the immediate like end user buyer of your product, but you also need to think about the people who are like very influential to the audience you want to reach. And those might not be people who are going to be customers of yours, but it is valuable to you to get their attention because they have the attention of the people you want to reach. So, great piece. I would suggest. I think go on Opt-in Weekly and search Spark Toro or something, or like. But the concept is when you think about like ABM and finding these people that you want to sell to, also think about people who influence people you want to sell to and how you could interview them, how you could get your content in front of them, what it would mean to you if they mentioned you on their social profile or if they mentioned you in their newsletter. And I think you have to kind of just get thick skinned about not, I always go after people not pitching them what I want them to say, but actually giving, like, deliver value to them first. Give them a reason to actually connect. And so sometimes that is, hey, I shared your content in my newsletter, or I love the way you think about this, but it has to be genuine. And you have to be okay with if they never shared your content, would it still be a worthwhile relationship to have created? But just being in uh, their echo chamber, for lack of a better word, will turn the gears in your head in a different way because you will start to learn how they speak to the audience you want to reach.
Yeah, exactly. And analyzing other people that are in your niche and understanding how they're also reaching the audience is a very valuable strategy. Analyzing what your other people are doing and then figuring out what strategy to take next on your own brand is very valuable. It really is. And also, you brought up a good point when it comes to just forming the relationship itself. Let's say if no sales come out of the relationship, you never know what may happen in the future.
Mhm.
Like, for example, let's say someone that subscribes to your flower content, your florist content, a flower of the day. Let's say they just like looking at flowers online. They don't even want to own flowers. Eventually, once someone brings up that like, oh, like I'm trying to get these flowers and I really need
Mhm.
someone to do it, then she's going to instantly remember that valuable piece of content and she goes, okay, you need to get after this one person. She does this flower of the day thing, and her content is amazing. And I'll share the link with you. She does amazing flowers, and she's a great florist. And that way, no matter what happens, you're building a relationship with
Mhm.
customers and with other people. And you may not get the sale at the very beginning or in a year or 2 years, but eventually, as people start to know you and you're building that relationship with them, eventually something will happen. Something
Right.
people love, people, we're social creatures. We are. And as long as you're providing value that makes people remember of who you are, then
Mhm.
long term, you are going to win.
Yes.
Someone is going to ask about something and they will bring you up because they will remember that valuable piece that you added to their life. And that's the important thing. When you add value to the end person, you are creating a very strong memory within their mind that they're going to remember for a very long time. So when something does pop up, they will think of you. So that's what's super important to remember.
Yes. So it's interesting because what we're talking about is we're basically saying be human and giving, right? And it's sad that that's refreshing right now. Do you see what I'm saying? Like right now, it's really easy to zig or to zag when everyone's zigging because everyone's saying, like, I'm sure you get cold pitches all day long, right? And so imagine when you send the email that's not the cold pitch. Like it immediately is like higher ranked in your mind space than all the people who said like, hey, thanks for touching this piece of content that I created. When can we get on a call? Because that's the way the world is working right now. So when you say, hey, glad you enjoyed this, just wanted to let you know I've got like 50 other resources like this. Here's the library link, and no ask.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're earning the right to be promotional because you're not immediately slapping them in the face with why you really want to be in relationship with them. So
And
you have to, the motive has to be there. The intention has to be, I really want to help people.
mm-hmm.
And this is how I can. And it's tied to a brand.
Yeah, and that, I completely agree with that. And I always use the girl analogy when it comes to not asking. Like for example, when a girl likes you and you say that you like her back, she's not as interested into you. But if you say, but if she likes you and you just kind of like keep walking and you're like you act like you're not interested and you don't ask, then she's gonna be all over you. She's gonna say like she's gonna be like nonstop on top of you. And
Okay. So you're saying like the hard to get kind of mentality.
Yeah, like kind of like that. But when you're producing content and you don't sell and you don't have the ask, they're gonna go, wait a second, like that's not right. You can't like they say like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, what does he do? And they get curious and they start asking you questions like, hey, like what do you do? Like
Mm-hmm.
because they're so curious of like why you didn't ask like they
Yeah.
didn't sell to them, and it makes it where they get curious, and now you have clients and prospects coming to you saying like, okay, you obviously know about the subject very well, like what do you do? And that's where you can provide a lot of value and get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people coming your way because of that.
Yeah, I would say that that's a delicate balance that some
Mhm.
people would say you're crazy if you don't have a CTA, right? Like if you don't like, so one option is to have subtle CTAs, subtle non-committal. Like I want one thing, your email address, if you want more of me, instead of like the 15 field form that is obviously sizing someone up to see if it's worth a sales cadence or something. But I think beyond that, and this is something I've written about before, and I will do the thing where I don't say it as eloquently as I wrote it. So get ready. But sometimes the content itself, not each individual piece, but content as a whole that your company is putting out or that your personal brand is consistently delivering. Sometimes that is the CTA, right? The CTA is follow what I'm saying because I'm offering you a different path than what you have been on. And so that applies really well mentally to me with B2B, right? Because we always sell solutions to pain points, etc. But I took a great course a few months back from Marcus Andrews, who was at HubSpot as a product marketing manager, VP. I don't know the exact title, but
Mhm.
he was behind the release of content of the flywheel. And so they went, the old way is the funnel, the new way is the flywheel. We need to be focusing on the value that word of mouth can bring by serving customers around and around the flywheel instead of forcing them through the funnel, right? And so what that did, and that's what narrative design has course teaches people to do, is to build a framework where you're saying there's a change in the world and it's impacting this industry in this way. The people who are winning are doing this. And we've written a playbook and given it a name, the flywheel, on how to do this. And oh, by the way, our product supports that. Right? And so it's not always about a single powerful piece of content that needs a CTA because you got to grab that person right away and make sure they're in your funnel. It's a like get them in your ecosystem by like the accumulation of value that they're getting from what you are publishing consistently, not like the one ebook a quarter or a year kind of mentality. And so when you change it and you're delivering quality consistently, then they naturally think of your product, and you've changed the way they've thought. You have created the demand for the play that you are telling them to use, and you are no longer going head to head, feature to feature with a lookalike product, because they're not marketing the playbook. They're marketing the feature set. So it's a complex thing, but it's how narrative can come into play, and it's how CTAs are built for like moving someone down a path, but they're also built for capturing and measuring attribution. And if you kind of stop worrying about where can I attribute this sale to, like what specific piece of content drove this sale, because like think about it. Any brand that you buy from, you're not like, and it was the blog on this.
Yeah.
That really, put like I will never buy from anyone else because they told me 5 ways to tie my shoes. Like, no, that's just how they got you in the door. But you wouldn't have made that purchase if everything you read from them didn't resonate in some way that made you feel like this is a solid decision I'm making.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And when it comes call to actions, you have to ask yourself, is the call to action worth actually putting on the piece of content if it will drive less relationships? Like, if you think about it, if, like, for example, you provide a valuable piece of content, and after you say, like, along the lines of, you sell them at the very end, like, I'm trying to think of a case where I can like sell them. Like for example, like the florist example, like you provide that valuable piece of content and then you start sell. You might lose that relationship because they're going to be saying, oh, you're only providing that valuable piece of content because of the sell. And then it becomes less valuable and less real when you start selling them right after the valuable piece of content. Yes, you'll get more, but like if you keep selling yourself, you might ruin the opportunity to create and develop a relationship with the other person, because they're going to say, oh, they're only providing me value because they want to sell me, and that's it. And then you have a potential to ruin that relationship there, rather than if you just kept providing valuable content, they would have naturally figured out what you do. And at the end of the day, once you provide value, people will find a way to always look you up at the end of the day. Like,
I'm going to counter this a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
I think you could do this thing where you get in the like dangerous friend zone. Like brand I love to read stuff from, but I never buy anything from. And I think that a lot of people get like this imposter syndrome and they don't want to sell themselves, and they will buy into this a little too much. Like, I don't know what's wrong. I keep putting content out there and nobody's coming and figuring out what I sell and why they could buy from me. So I think you have to balance. I think you can do 10% promotional. I think you're actually potentially doing yourself a disservice if you're not somewhat clear and honest about the fact that you sell something. Because everyone's working for a living, right? Like no one's doing, like, I think you can provide free content and not be ashamed to say, if you want to talk to me about X, get in touch. I think the fear, like the problem is when you say like 2 paragraphs of good quality content, 10 paragraphs about what you sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that 10 paragraphs about what you sell, that has a place. So say like the click, right, is a great marketing email. If people don't know about it, go check it out. Russ Henneberry is a god. And so this is a 4-day a week, I think like Tuesday through Friday, daily email that gives me immense value. Great marketing tips in there. Great, love the tone. Like there's something in there every day that I want to click on. Great newsletter. He sells info products and he sells courses, live courses, and then courses that were recorded. He's going to promote those on occasion in the click. And then when it's coming time for a live event, he is going to send a sales cadence that's, 4 days in a row, the email that this event is coming up and you can lock in this price. And people who absolutely hate it are going to unsubscribe, right? Like, oh, hit me with the sales sequence. How dare he? People who get the value of the newsletter ought to be aligned with buying that course, right? So they either buy it or they don't, but they stay subscribed. Honestly, the people who unsubscribe, you're kind of not marketing them to them anymore anyway, right? Because they were never going to buy. So it's okay for some people to walk away because you tried to sell them something. Like you have to just kind of get over that and know that like you need to teach them the behaviors of buying and be honest about the fact that you would love to be able to serve them more one day. If this is the free stuff, then what does the paid stuff look like, right? It ought to be valuable. But don't get into a trap where people are like, oh, did you see that Ashley actually asked me if I was interested in her product? Right? Because you don't want to be like the brand in the friend zone.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, you're right that there's a balance. So I think having that relevancy is super important. The more relevant the product is when you're selling something, I think is extremely important. But I feel like most companies fall into the trap of only sales. Like that's why that's why I go on the whole opposite and saying don't do any sales. That's the reason why I go so extreme on that side is because all I ever see is the opposite. All I ever see is sell, 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 sell. And I never see, like, it's very rare to see companies actually trying to provide value at the very end. So that's the only reason. I do agree that you do have to sell 20, 30% of the time, yes, to gain that sale. But I see very little companies that they fall into this trap. They start like wanting to do more and more sales. They start incrementally pushing 30, 40, 50, because valuable pieces of content takes a lot of time and effort to create, and they fall into this trap of they incrementally keep going that 20, 30, 40, and they start just selling more than providing value. And I see lots and lots of companies fall into that trap. That's why I just go full extreme and say just provide value and that's it. And that's the reasoning for it, because I see a lot of companies that fall into that trap.
Yeah, I can buy into that. I think it's probably very much based on the reputation you've already established, and it's based on your competitive landscape, and it's also based on what goals you need to hit to stay employed for the next month. And I think a lot of times companies make poor decisions about content because they want the podcast to have a like easily measurable ROI.
Yeah.
But you and I know that if somebody listens to this conversation and heard about a brand I mentioned or the click, right? They heard about the click. Then they go and they subscribe to it. Like Russ can't go like, that was because of the podcast, like the path won't be there But you have to like sometimes intuitively trust that doing good things will earn you word of mouth, will earn you people on your list who will then convert and buy that course about the thing that the girl who on the podcast talked about, right? So it's I think it's interesting because what like digital marketing, that was new, right? Like there were like banner ads when I was a teenager, right? They were horrible. But digital marketing is really just marketing, but it's different ways of getting attention and sharing information, and word of mouth always wins. If I have an event right now, I have Newsletter Fest coming up, right? Facebook ads were running pretty well for a while. I was getting like 50 cents a click to just come through to the site. And then they revved up. Like when I did audience expansion, bleh, horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Got so many more subscribers because one reputable newsletter shared it. And I didn't ask them to. Someone on their staff saw it, thought it was a great thing to share with their audience. So many more good subscribers who will benefit from this free festival, right? But who could be future curated customers. But because a good reputable source shared that information, I think you go for that kind of ripple effect, I would call it. Like that is your intention with quality content, is that if I say something of value consistently enough, it will echo.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And also, I wanted to bring up what do you typically see gets the best email signups? You mentioned that you are kind of hesitant about pop-ups. What else would you recommend to someone starting a newsletter to get the most email signups? Is it, for example, midway in the blog post? Is it at the bottom of a blog post? Where do you typically put your email sign-up form to get the most newsletter signups?
I think you need it at the top of, like, I think you need a CTA button or a link in the hero section of your newsletter, I mean, of your website. If your website is not the newsletter's website, like, right, because some people have a separate landing page for their newsletter sign up, so you can easily just have a link to that. So I think that is a great way when someone is browsing your brand for them to be like, I don't want to like get into a sales call conversation, but I'll just subscribe to their newsletter, right? And I will say that your open rate is a good litmus test of how well your brand is resonating, right? Because it's the do they or don't they want to engage with your content. Because at some point they said they might, and now they're like, where are they? So top of your website, I say if you have social accounts that have followings, you need a way for people to subscribe in your profile. And then you need to know the rules of each, not the rules, but the best results practices of each channel. So if you're on LinkedIn, you're posting a link in the comments and not in the post, because you're going to get better traction that way. But then additionally, people recommending your newsletter or getting on lists of good newsletters is probably going to get you higher little spurts of people signing up than all those other like various ways to be found, right? Because you're waiting to be found. But if you are influencing the right people who are recommending you to their audience, then that's going to get you the biggest growth. So that's why I emphasize like growing relationships. And the best feeling is when someone genuinely recommends you, right? Like they have decided that their audience would like what you've done. And getting in front of them can be a little bit of a dance, right? You got to decide like how likely is this person to respond to a DM, and what would that first DM need to be? It's as complicated as deciding what a subject line should be. Right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that you can get subscriptions through like Facebook lead gen ads, but that those are not going to be as quality and in your ICP as people who influence the audience you're going after. And then you like actually not being afraid to consistently in the links say like, hey, if you like this, here's my newsletter. I tend to post something that is related to what my recent newsletter has been about, and then just say links to the latest issue in the comments, and they can subscribe from there if they're interested. But I amplify a lot of voices. Like I intentionally say, go listen to this person and subscribe to their stuff. And I've seen some of that come back around, but I do it with the heart, knowing that if they never sent someone my way, I would be completely like, it has to be someone I am behind sending people to, right? And I'm sure they feel that same way. And if they're not doing that for me yet, that means I still have to earn it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Building those relationships and earning trust. That's the best way to do that is through valuable content. And I guess that's all we have time for. I don't want to go into another question. That's all we really have time for.
It's okay.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on. And I guess that's all we have time for. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you,
Yes,
guys.
thank you for having me.